Welcome to Field Lab Earth, the podcast that's all about past and present advances in the fields of agronomic, crop, soil, and environmental sciences. Today, we'll be talking to Kyle Richardville. Growing vegetables in urban gardens is becoming a popular and ever more important option for supporting families with nutritious and healthy produce. However, the use of chemical fertilizers and pesticides can cause negative impacts on soil, crop, and human health. To reduce these negative impacts, there is a growing interest in using biologicals and compost manure for crop production. This episode, Kyle Richardville, agronomist and regenerative agriculture consultant at Understanding Ag, shares his insights on the importance of a compost made from tree leaves and fungi, leaf mold compost, and how it impacts soil microbial communities, soil physical properties, and overall crop production. I'm your host, Abby Morrison. Let's talk about science. Hi everyone, welcome to the show. Today we have Kyle Richardville with us. Kyle grew up on a 4,500 acre vegetable and row crop farm in southwestern Indiana, where they raised soybean, wheat, potatoes, sweet corn, and various other produce crops. Kyle, his siblings, and cousins are the sixth generation to be farming in the area. He received a bachelor's in food and nutrition and went on to conduct graduate level research at Purdue University in Dr. Lori Hoagland's Soil Microbial Ecology Lab. Post-graduation, Kyle continued working in agricultural research with positions at Texas A&M University and North Carolina A&T. He now works in the United Kingdom as a regenerative agriculture consultant with the company Understanding Ag. Hello, Kyle. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing super well. So we are going to be talking about tomatoes today. It is the summer of tomato podcast this year. So we're talking about some ways that urban agriculture people can do a better job growing tomatoes. So can you just start us off by talking a little bit about some of the issues that these farmers can face when trying to grow this specific crop?
Absolutely, Abby. Yeah, tomatoes are quite notorious for their susceptibility to bacterial and fungal diseases. So there are just a couple ways to combat it when a tomato plant gets those infections. One is with chemical pesticides, of course. And in an urban setting, that becomes a real challenge because many producers, they don't have the training to be able to apply those pesticides, but two, they're in a very densely populated area, so we want to really limit our chemical use in those areas. Not that we want the rural areas to be the chemical waste dumps, but when you're densely populated like that, you really need to be aware of the chemicals you're putting on. So another way to combat them then, if we're not going to use chemicals, is with biological means, and that was really the crux of our issue, was to discover if a certain fungus called Trichoderma harzianum can help tomato plants both resist disease pressure and maybe produce more fruit for the producer at the same time.
Awesome. So you were going to use this leaf mold compost. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But can you just describe kind of what that is and what it looks like before we launch in a little bit farther?
Absolutely. Yep. So fungi, they like to break down things that are more woody, and we call that having a high carbon to nitrogen ratio, such as wood chips, or in this case, dried municipal leaves. And urban farmers can really take advantage of this resource because fallen leaves in autumn are about the most abundant organic matter that can be composted. And so one of the farmers near Purdue University named Dan Perkins, he actually, I believe, gets paid by his local city to take those leaves off of his hand. Win-win, because it's actually really expensive to purchase a spot in a landfill to dump those leaves. So if you're a farmer listening to this podcast and you want free compostable material or even get paid for it, see if your city collects leaves and needs a place for it to go. So what he did was he put these municipal leaves into what we call windrows, so long rows in his field. And in a normal composting situation, you would turn it quite often to get it aerated and to get the microbial activity going, and it gets really hot. But what that does actually is it's harmful to the fungi because their bodies are long and spindly. So when you turn the pile, you're actually breaking them up and killing the fungi. So what we do in this leaf mold compost is we leave it and we just let it sit and decompose and let the fungi do their thing. I think he turned it about twice a year, and then in the summer he would tarp it to then get that heat to kill the pathogens, the disease-causing microbes, and any weed seeds that might be in that. So after about 2 or 3 years, what you get is this rich, dark, black, crumbly, earthy smelling product we call leaf mold compost.
Okay, so it's like a different, so it still looks kind of like regular compost soil, but is just made using kind of a different technique.
Correct. Yep. It's very friendly toward fungi, and so we get a rich fungal component compost, and the goal is, at least in our research, for it to be an environment where our inoculation of the friendly fungi can survive better.
Okay, and that's the inoculation. I'm probably jumping way ahead here, but the inoculation of that friendly fungi is after it's applied. So you're trying to grow the fungi. Sorry, do you say fungi or fungi? I want to be.
It's either. Here in the UK, they say
Okay.
fungi. So, I mean, it's
Okay.
whatever.
All right. Well, maybe I'll switch it up throughout.
I
Just to
think I
keep
say
it fun.
fungi. I think I say fungi, though.
Okay. Well, then I'll use your pronunciation.
Sure. Yep.
So you want the fungi to not only survive, obviously, through being able to create this compost material, but then you're also adding it to, like your pots or rows or raised beds or whatever you're using to grow the tomatoes. So you want them there also?
That's right. So this particular fungi called Trichoderma harzianum that I mentioned was a variant of it was developed at Cornell University, and they called it T22. And this variant that they created, kind of like plant breeding, but they bred this fungi for its natural ability to help plants suppress disease and acquire nutrients and that sort of thing. So when we were germinating these seedlings, we planted the seeds in 72 cell trays. And then we put a little bit of inoculation while it was still in the greenhouse. And then when we transplanted them to the field, we also gave them that inoculation. We did that twice while in the field. So half of the tomato plants got 3 drenches of that inoculation, while the other half did not.
Awesome. Well, I also noted that you, on our outline, we wanted to touch on just some things about the health of the leaves that go into the compost and things you just want to be careful about when using this compost. So I don't know if you want to touch on that real quick.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So these municipal waste products, even if it's yard waste or garden waste, you oftentimes don't know what you're going to get. For example, we found a pretty big chain in ours. So we really recommend you get your compost tested if it was produced on a municipal basis, or if you're just getting the leaves and then make the compost, please get it tested, because if you're going to be growing food in it, we want to make sure there's not contamination with any kind of heavy metal, or pathogen, but that's kind of down to you to make it properly. But really the heavy metals is what we're really worried about, so no one gets sick from the produce they're growing.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm now going to walk us back a little bit because we kind of jumped over this, but
Sure.
Can you tell me more about just what some of your hypotheses were going in on this, and also why using this kind of compost is going to be a better option? I mean, obviously, if it can help these fungi survive, but like, what other benefits are there that you were hoping to test for this specific compost?
Yeah, so our hypothesis, or rather Dr. Laurie Hoagland's previous research, showed that this inoculum would work and would suppress disease when in the greenhouse in a nice controlled setting. But when they took it outdoors, results varied widely. And so she wanted to add this fungal-rich compost to the field as a way to create this fungal-friendly environment. So then we can have a more surefire way of telling farmers, hey, if you use this inoculum, it's going to improve plant health. So actually, leaves contain, some research shows, nearly up to twice the amount of minerals compared to a manure if you got that composted. So for example, here in the UK, many livestock farmers, they grow willow trees because cobalt deficiency is a common issue in lambs. And so what they do is willows hyperaccumulate cobalt. So then those lambs munch on the leaves and now they have cobalt in their system, which is great. And it's the same for municipal leaves. When they compost, they have a rich content of minerals in it. So that's one reason to use leaf compost. Another is that using, let's say, food scraps or yard waste or manure can accumulate a lot of phosphorus. And in fact, over applying compost and manures will often create phosphorus toxicity, and that can cause issues with plant uptake of other nutrients like calcium, iron, and zinc. But with leaves, because they're not that green material, there's much less phosphorus. So there's a good balance between other nutrients and phosphorus. And then lastly, compost with a higher fungal to bacteria ratio, which is what we're trying to create, a fungal happy compost, are actually hypothesized to impart a greater biocontrol activity against disease-causing pathogens. So all of that working together are reasons why leaf compost is beneficial for the farmer.
Sure. Do they know what the mechanisms are behind why the fungal-friendly compost is better, or what the fungi are adding to that equation?
I think that's a really good question, really complicated question when you dive into soil ecology. But basically, I think it's about 90% of land plants have a relationship with soil fungi. And so I was listening actually to Dr. Gary Harmon. He's the professor from Cornell that developed this trichoderma strain called T22. Just to brush up, because it's been a couple of years since this research was done. But basically, in this case, the trichoderma infects the plant root, which we think that's not a good thing. But in fact, with beneficial fungi, it's very, very beneficial. So it infects the plant root, and it creates this bartering system whereby plants give fungi carbon and energy from photosynthesis, and the fungi deliver nutrients from the soil and water, and they can actually connect plant to plant in what's called the Wood Wide Web, the original Wood Wide Web. So
I love that.
yeah, it's brilliant. And but he was also saying that just the fact that when they dock in the root, when they connect, they actually turn on genes in the plant to increase their immune system function. It's called induced systemic resistance. So what he was saying was they infect the root and they connect, and that imparts immune resistance up in the leaves. So that signal gets sent from the roots all the way up to the leaves, and that makes them more resistant to things like powdery mildew. It's really fascinating, actually.
Oh, man, that is so fascinating. I love this. I'm learning so much more from the Center for Sode than I anticipated, just by adding in more random questions. Thank you for tolerating all the curveballs. But what I love about this in particular is it just feels like, once again, I love when science is like, what is nature doing? Like, can we just do that? Because it is, just that very natural symbiotic relationship, kind of fostering that, or just, leaves obviously normally fall on ground instead of in a landfill. So it's like, why not use leaves? So I really, really love that about this research. I have a question about when you are moving two questions. The first question is, when you're moving this compost from kind of where it's been growing and it has all of these healthy fungi in it, is that going to kind of kill a lot of the fungi that are already there, or do some of them survive and that's part of why it's very fungi friendly? Or are you, kind of like very gently scooping it as you're moving it along to try to preserve as much as possible? And then also, just to help me better picture all of this, can you tell us just what this particular fungus looks like? And how, if it doesn't die a bunch when it gets moved, how it does that, if you happen to know.
Yeah, so to answer your first question, I think you can treat it like normal compost because it's in such large quantities. They use scoops and other tractor implements to put it into the truck bed. So, the general rule with fungi is, like I said, because they have long, spindly bodies, the less disturbance, the better. So like tilling a field, that's very detrimental to them. That's one reason why no-till is a good option for growing soil fungi populations. But I would say in the moving of that compost, you're going to have a lot that survive. And you're going to have a lot of spores that are very hardy that have been produced during that production of the compost. So once you put it in place where you want, and you have that residual food source for the fungi, their spores are going to basically germinate and grow wherever their resting place is. So unless you're turning it a bunch to get it, where you need it to go, I think it should be okay. And in regards to your second question, a lot of these fungi are impossible to see with the naked eye. So I don't know how deep you want to go into it, but there are basically two major types of soil fungi. One is called saprophytic. They break down organic matter. They're the decomposers. And those you can see with the naked eye, like white rot mold fungus on an old log. You can see that. But the second is mycorrhizal fungi. Myco meaning fungus, rhizo meaning root. So they cling on to the root and connect and dock, kind of like our T22 example. Those are you can't see with the naked eye. Under a microscope, they kind of look like a long, spindly figure.
Okay. Yeah, I think for me, my default whenever I hear like a fungi is just going to be like a mushroom that I would just see in my yard. And so it's helpful to have a better understanding of kind of obviously just the physical characteristics, but in particular the size, especially as you're talking about, tilling them and having them survive. Obviously if you chop off a mushroom, it's going to be struggling for a little bit there. So we've talked a little bit about some of your methods, but I would love to hear more about just kind of maybe a little bit of a refresher on a high level, but also, what you were specifically hoping to test when you had these multiple inoculations of this fungus into these soils. Can you tell me more about that?
Absolutely. So, yeah, we wanted to test whether, one, the leaf mold compost helped that inoculation survive out in the wild. Two, how that compost affected the soil in general, different properties, like does it add soil organic matter? Does it change pH? How about nutrients? That sort of thing. And we also wanted to test the biological effects of it. So we ran a test called an FDA. Does it increase overall soil microbial activity? And then does it increase active soil organic matter? Meaning, was there an increase in immediately available food for the microbes to do beneficial things for the farmer, like cycle nutrients, for example? And then lastly, we wanted to test whether all of those factors together helped the tomato plants resist disease and produce healthier fruits and more fruits for the farmer.
Hi everyone, I hope you're enjoying the show. Interested in learning more? Kyle's paper, Leaf Mold Compost for Better Soil and Crop Health, published in Urban Agriculture and Regional Food Systems, is always freely available. If you are a certified crop advisor or certified professional soil scientist, you can take a quiz for continuing education units for this episode, which can be found in our show notes or on certifiedcropadvisor.org. Thank you for being our sponsor. Let's get back to the show. Yeah, seems like a whole bunch of interesting things to look for. Obviously, if the plant just dies, even if all the rest of that stuff gets better, maybe step in the wrong direction. So that makes a lot of sense to me. So what did you find in these many areas that you were investigating?
Gosh, we found so much. And in fact, this was during COVID. And so we didn't even get to do everything we wanted to do. So, but what we did find was yield increased by about 60% in tomato plants that were growing in the compost compared to not in the compost. That was amazing. That was absolutely incredible to see. The leaf mold compost actually did improve various soil health properties, including what's called cation exchange capacity. So it could hold more nutrients for the plant in an exchangeable manner. It did increase active soil organic matter, so that food that's available for the microbes to do things for us, and plant available nitrogen. And that's massively valuable nowadays, especially with the price of nitrogen increasing. So those were just a couple of the things we found. Another big one was there were fewer transplant deaths when moving them from the greenhouse to the field. And that, again, saves the farmer so much money and time from having to, pluck out the dead ones, put the new ones in and grow them from there. But it appears that the compost, not really so much the fungi, increased that ability for the plant to survive that transplant from the greenhouse to the field. And that can be a big change for a little plant, going from ideal moist conditions to the harsh conditions of the field. And I believe that year we actually had what was called a derecho. I don't know if it reaches Wisconsin, but those hard straight line winds that knocked down about 80% of the Iowa corn crop one year, that hit us as well. And our tomato plants, it turns out when they have a healthier soil medium, they survive better. That was incredible to see.
Wow, that's amazing. That's crazy. Well, that's great. So I forgot to ask this earlier, but I think it would be helpful in clarifying. For your control for this experiment, was it just testing whether or not it had the leaf compost, or were there also controls that didn't get the inoculations at all?
Correct. Yep, there were controls in each of those groups. And actually, there was a third variable. We used two different types of tomato.
Oh, okay.
So we used one that looks like a little grape tomatoes, and then one that looked like one you would slice up and put on your cheeseburger type tomatoes. So there were three variables, and that means there were 8 groups. So 2 to the third power, 2 times 2 times 2. So a tomato could have one of the two varieties. It could have compost or not, and it could have inoculation or not. And
Sure.
so wading through all of that statistical data was a bear, but it was fun to see all the differences.
Yeah. Were there any differences between the different tomato types?
There actually were, and it was surprising because it was opposite of what we see in the greenhouse. So we saw fewer of the hamburger tomatoes deaths when being transplanted, but actually previous studies showed that the grape tomato called Corberino had a bigger response in the greenhouse. So that was very interesting to see.
Interesting. It's nice to think about that in like an urban setting in particular, because you might just have like a rooftop greenhouse where you can just leave them in there for the whole season and they'll be fine. And maybe you move some of them outside. So that's really awesome, specifically for the urban setting. I like that a lot. I'm like so happy that you got so many results, and I'm just so excited about all the things that you still have that you could have tested, circumstances allowing, and may be able to start testing now. So where is research with this headed? What other places are there to explore with this? Obviously quite a lot.
Gosh, yeah, there are so many directions you can go with this. One of the projects that got nixed because of COVID was the nutritional value of the tomatoes, given the different treatments. That would have been my personal favorite project, given that I was a nutrition major in my undergrad. So I was really looking forward to doing that, but COVID had other plans on that one. But a future student could study that and show how does soil health affect nutrient density in those tomatoes. That would be great. We also wanted to know how many years do those benefits persist? Should a farmer be applying this every year, every 2 years, every 3 years? Given the nature of master's research, and it's usually 2 or 3 years, it's hard to test that. So it'd have to be replicated maybe on an actual farmer's field that works with the university, or subsequent masters just replicate, what I did. Who knows? Um, I think another future study could be, how does the compost indeed increase inoculation survivability? Maybe that could be a PhD, getting really, really in the weeds, but the mode of action, it was an initial research study to say, yes, this can happen. Now we need further research to show, how does it happen?
Yeah. Oh man, this research is so exciting because there's all of these like a bajillion rabbit trails available to me. So I'm trying to contain myself a little bit here. So is there any impact on, and maybe this is just another field of research, but is there any impact on like the flavor of the tomatoes from this kind of thing? Or is that just like an unrelated factor?
I think it's directly correlated. When you read the research, you see that it's not necessarily organic matter that affects nutrient density in food. It's organic matter plus soil microbial activity shuttling nutrients and other things into the plant. So then the plant has the raw materials to make what we call plant secondary metabolites. And it's very interesting because those then are what our body recognizes as flavor. So that's why, your grandma's tomato grown in her garden with love, compared to the tomato from the supermarket you cut open and half of it's still white. You can really visually see and taste the difference just by the way they're grown and because of the soil health and soil microbial activity.
Yeah. Yeah. Grandma's love, ultimate secondary metabolites.
That's
for
right.
Sure. Oh, man. Well, this has been such a great conversation. I am just blown away by all the cool results that you found and just what a cool project that is. But I am going to wind us down here. So first question is, if people want to learn more about any of the things that we've talked about today, where can they go?
I would say YouTube is a great resource. We call it YouTube University. Go study. We have knowledge at our fingertips, absolutely. So if you type in trichoderma or soil fungi, you're just going to open up Pandora's box of information. Specifically thinking about a good book, Teaming with Fungi is a really, really good book to learn about all things soil fungi. And I would say lastly, the company I currently work for is called Understanding Ag. And on our website, understandingag.com, we have all kinds of free resources and webinars, blogs by expert, fact sheets about all things soil health. So I really encourage everyone listening to check that out.
Sure. All right. We will include notes to some of those resources as we are available to do so. I'm sure trichoderma is in your paper, which we'll have a link to if people need help with the spelling, as I am sure I would. So then second of the final three questions is, if people want to then take that next step and get involved, be that as an urban farmer or a researcher or a student or anything else, how can they do that?
I think as a consumer, we can all get involved by either supporting a local farmer at the farmer's market, trying to grow, let's say, you could say regeneratively or agroecologically, biologically, whatever you want to say. You're just supporting your local farmer that's trying to do things the right way and build their soil health. That could also mean joining a community supported agriculture program, or what's called a CSA. That's also a good option. And this is kind of a newer answer, but regenerative is going to be labeled on foods in the near future. And in fact, I think Whole Foods actually, you can buy regeneratively labeled food. And so I would be on the lookout for that. Not to have a shameless plug, but our sister company is called Regenified, and that's what they do. And so some of the products in Whole Foods are Regenified certified. And actually here in the UK, we had a great week 2 weeks ago with one of the supermarkets called Waitrose, which is kind of like our Whole Foods. And they're wanting to supply regeneratively by 2035, 100% of their produce. And so they've decided to use Regenified as the verification to do so. So as a consumer, just be on the lookout for any label, or specifically Regenified, to make sure that what you're getting was produced in a way that is protecting soil health, building soil health, and soil fungi.
Cool. Well, congratulations on that. That's very cool. And I had no idea that they were going to start adding that as a label. That's really exciting. I like that. So, final question for you is, what is one fun fact that listeners wouldn't know about you if all they had was your research?
Oh gosh. I guess listeners might be interested to know that I have published a book. It's a fictional book called Beast of Burden, and I wrote it for my 8 nieces and nephews. They're between the ages of about 3 and 14. The oldest is going into high school, and I just wanted to write a book for them about, standing up for what you believe in, doing the right thing even when it's tough, and telling that story in a kind of a fun way that kids would appreciate. So yeah, Beast of Burden, you can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and we have the, I think, softback version and audio versions on both of those. But I'd be thankful for anybody that wanted to check it out and give it a read.
Yeah, for sure. Make sure you rate and review books by small authors, especially, people. That's my public service announcement. I'm going to throw in there as well to help support our dear guest, Kyle. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. Love this research. Thank you so much for joining us for this call and kind of looking back at some old research. And best wishes on all of your future endeavors, literary and otherwise.
Hey, thanks so much, Abby. Thanks for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Student Spotlight, where we highlight the work of graduate and undergraduate society student members. Today we'll be talking to Udit. Welcome to the show. Can you start us off by introducing yourself and where you're studying?
Hi, my name is Udit Devangshi. I am a graduate research assistant here at Kansas State University, working in precision agriculture under the supervision of Dr. Gaurav Jha.
Awesome. And what are you currently researching?
Well, currently I am actively working on 2 major projects. One is crop yield and quality prediction using early, mid, and late planting date through hyperspectral and multispectral imaging and machine learning models. Another project is evaluating of irrigation methods, precision irrigation methods to be more specific, like radar-based and robotic-based irrigation methods using spatio-temporal ET mapping and water budgeting.
Great. And if you could have your dream research project, what would that be?
Well, currently I am working on my dream projects. I really want to work in water management, and currently I am doing that, and I am so glad to do that.
Awesome. That's wonderful to hear. Well, if you'd like to get in touch with Udit about his work, we'll have his contact information in our show notes. Thank you so much for being on the show today, and best wishes on your future studies and career. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. Have a good day.
Thank you for listening to Field Lab Earth. More information can be found in the description below. Thank you.